Hi, I'm Kristal Park, and welcome to the Because She's Adopted podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing my co-host, Crystal Redpath, as she shares her adoption story. Let's get started. So, hello, Kristal.
Hello, Kristal.
This is our episode 1 of Because She's Adopted podcast, and you are adopted.
I am.
And I am also adopted. We are both adopted.
We are. I think that's part when I first met you, that was an instant bond for me. The minute I found out you were adopted. I don't know, it always gives me kind of that feeling of peace in some ways. Like the minute I meet someone else, even though we don't really talk, we hadn't talked about it back then. It's like something that's so familiar.
Yeah.
When I meet other adoptees.
Yeah. There's like this unspoken experience that we kind of know what that means.
What's up?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we met at the kids' school out in the playground, I think about 10 years ago. Yeah.
We did. Yeah. Our kids were in the same class forever ago. And I don't even remember how we found out each other's story, but we knew we were both adopted, but then we didn't really circle back around about it until much later.
You were actually the very first person to ever get me onto an adoption book. And I think you were the first person to ever help me explore adoption in a way other than just being grateful for being adopted and maybe recognizing that adoption had an impact on my life and had an impact on me and how I sort of existed in the world. And do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Yeah.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
I think I had suggested the book Primal Wound to you.
Yes.
And there was a second book as well. I had just begun exploring those books for myself as well. And they really were profound. Yeah, I hadn't read them until around that same time.
I thought that you had kind of been exploring that part of you for years and years.
No, not at all. It always, that knowledge about the adoption was always kind of in the background for me, but I hadn't really explored anything in depth to uncover what was really going on emotionally for me until I started reading those books.
I think one of the books that you did also recommend was Adoption Healing. And that was the very first book that I ever read. And I can remember it blowing my mind.
It blew my mind too.
Did it?
It blew my mind.
I never looked at it this way, but also reading through it and feeling like this guy gets it. He knows what he's talking about. Like every page I'd turn, I was like, yes. Oh my gosh. It was like all of the feelings that I had had for so many years, I finally had words to put to them.
100% agree with that.
Yeah.
It was really validating for me to know that other people felt the same way that I was feeling. And I could actually kind of start tying things together. And I didn't always feel like I was losing my mind at times.
Yes, because you do. You feel you feel like you're going crazy. It's like almost like this gaslighting of yourself where you're like, you know that you feel totally uncomfortable in your skin. You know that there's something there, but you just can't put your finger on it. And then, you're acting out in all of these ways that is so insane. And you're like, what is wrong with me?
So when I watched your film for the first time, I really related to it when everything was around your adoption.
Yeah.
That part when Stuart said, is this going to be about your adoption again?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that was really prevalent in my life. I would always circle back to the story, but not really making the connection to what was actually going on underneath the surface for me. So I could really relate to that part.
Yeah.
People were really interested in knowing about my adoption story.
Yeah.
So I knew there was something there on one level, but I avoided it at all costs. years until I was mid to late 30s, really starting to dig a little bit deeper.
That was about the same timing for me as well. I feel like I had done, all of this sort of self-development type healing work. It was like, okay, I've read books on anger, on codependency, on boundaries, on addiction, on like all sorts of, on everything. I feel like I'd explored every single topic except my adoption. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, of course, this is a major root cause of all of these things going on in my life.
Yeah, it is. It's about going back and gathering the trail of crumbs and helping you figure out who you are as a person. It's all about identity and stepping into who you are as a person. Yeah. And sometimes that means going back to fill in the gaps. For me, it was anyway, not for everybody.
Yeah. So you were adopted as a baby.
I was born September 17th, 78 in Edmonton, Alberta. I was put up for adoption the end of April, 1979. So I was raised with my biological mother and father for that period of time. So I lived about 7 months with my biological mother and father. My biological mom had me when she was 15, put me up for adoption when she dropped out of school actually, and put me up for adoption when it would have been her grade 10 year. So they were very young, very, very young. My biological dad would have been 17, 18 years old at the time. And they really tried to keep me, from my understanding. They just could not pull it together and make it happen.
For you, that was, you had some time, like a better part of your first year was with your parents. So what happened? What led to the adoption?
I think that it was a combination of their youth, their wanting to live their life. They were really struggling to make ends meet. I know there was a lot of drugs involved at the time. I know they were selling drugs in order to make ends meet. And I understand that there was a police raid at the apartment and they hid drugs in the diaper bag. So when police did the raid, they confiscated the diaper bag full of drugs. And then I was taken at that point into social services protection and placed in foster care.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've probably told your story 1,000 times, but when you tell it, do you feel connected to that story?
I think historically, I just told this story.
Yeah.
When I tell it now, I can connect to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's for me to understand as a mother now what that would have felt like. Yeah. I can have a lot of compassion for them during that period of time. I know that they made the best decision for themselves at the time. It made sense. It made sense. Their plan was to put me into a home that would be able to provide for me a better life than what they were providing. Completely understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they made a go at it. They tried to stay together. Their relationship lasted a couple months after that, and they parted ways. And I only know that from finding them on the journey later on in life. But at that point, I was placed in a home in a small town in Alberta. I was raised on a farm.
You were?
Yeah, I was. Farm girl. Total farm girl.
I love it.
Yeah, central Alberta. And I had a little brother that came along 3 years after I was adopted into the family, and he also was adopted.
Okay, so there was two of you, and your adopted parents just couldn't conceive, or?
Yes, my mom could never have children and always wanted children. So when she was in her mid-20s, her and my adopted father decided it was time to look into it.
Yeah.
So they went to Edmonton. Then there was a social services agency in Edmonton, and that's where we were adopted.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I guess it was above a Canadian Tire. So they always told me that they got me a Canadian Tire. That was kind of the ongoing joke at the time.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And who named you?
Good question. Actually, I was, my name at birth was Angie Marie.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I was placed for adoption in my family's home, they renamed me to Kristal Dawn. Yeah.
Kristal, the very extremely 80s name.
Really? I know. And Dawn.
Yeah, Dawn
was such a common name too.
Yeah, that's funny. I know I was born and named Melissa Elizabeth, which it was interesting. Afterwards, I found out that the family member that connected my birth mother to my adoptive family, that was her name. But we always called her by a different name, by her like third middle name or whatever it was. But I found out later that I had been named after her, Melissa Elizabeth. So, but isn't it weird? Like, can you imagine being an Angie or?
You know, it's interesting. I never knew that I had a name change.
Okay.
For a long time. I can't recall now if my adoptive mother maybe had told me, but I don't remember really understanding that till I was like older.
Yeah.
And I was offended. How can you change a baby's name?
Yes.
I remember feeling that kind of like, whoa, what? Yeah. Am I actually a Kristal? And I had to kind of get around that because I just felt offended that someone would actually change a name after that long, like after me being, you know, a good part of a year as Angie, just not understanding why that would happen. I get it now. And I actually really love my name now.
Yeah. I have mixed feelings about that because to me, the name is is a little bit of your identity and a connection to your adoptive or to your birth parents, to your biological mother, and to your past. Yeah. I know a lot of adoptees who have actually changed their names back to their original names. You know?
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. And I only found out my my birth name at birth, given name at birth, because I was able to apply for my original live birth certificate.
Right.
And, you know, you have to pay a little bit of money and then they send it to you. And then, you know, it's a full list of your name, your, you know, mother's name and any other kind of information that they had, which
I did the same.
Did you do that?
I did the same.
Oh,
yeah.
What year did you do that in? Because I just did that in like 2021 or 2022.
Oh, I did that in 97.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I was fiercely curious. Like I was going to find out where I came from and who I was. Yeah. Wow. Actually, I could read something from that document. I find it fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
This is the original adoption information that they had released to me. I found it fascinating because it has my biological mother's handwriting on it and kind of a little description about who she was and what she was interested in. And this part especially, it says mother's reasons for surrender. The reason I am giving up the child is because I am not prepared to take on the responsibility. I am too young to be that much tied down. I really think someone else can provide a better home for it.
It.
Yeah.
What is that? Do you think that's like a birth mother's way of disconnecting themselves from the child that they are going to relinquish? Like
I do. Cause I mean, we were together for 7+ months. I definitely know, I mean, in my heart, no, I wasn't an it to her.
Yes.
But I can't imagine her being in that office, signing the paperwork to hand me over. And I think, to call me an it or the child, just maybe takes her a little bit away from what she would have been feeling emotionally. And in fact, I mean, when you think she was 16 at the time of relinquishment,
I have a 16-year-old daughter. You have a 16-year-old son. Can you imagine?
I cannot imagine. No. No, they're literal babies at that age too, right? So
yes.
Huge responsibility.
Yeah.
Huge. They would have been extremely overwhelmed in their life at that point in time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even in my own story, as my aunt would talk about, being there while I was born and everything, she'd always call me the baby. Like in their minds, you forever stay this baby, because so many people are so connected to the moment when you come into the family, I think too. And, when I talk to a lot of my cousins in my adoptive family, that's one of their they always connect me to my adoption,
Yeah.
They always connect me to when I came into the family and I was this like new little exciting, gift that came.
Do you feel that your adopted parents always did that too? Or was it more exterior family members?
Yes. Yeah. It was always so, like, when I think about any kind of big events like a graduation or my wedding or anything like that, and my mom would get up to say something about me, it was always went back to when we adopted Kristal.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah.
It's, I don't know.
They never made me feel adopted.
Yeah.
But it was always when we brought her home or when we brought him home.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if I feel like they did make me feel adopted because that was such a big part of my story. Like, on one hand, it was like, that was part of my story. That was part of my identity, that I was this adopted child that came into this family. My mom would, some of the things that parents say, and I'm sure my kids are going to say this too, but some of the things that parents say and the stories that my mom would tell over and over again and laugh about. And then when I really went through this journey of self-discovery and learning and about my adoption and connecting to it and really getting an idea of what I actually felt about the whole thing, it was like, that is a really weird story to tell and then laugh about. Like, she would say things like, I didn't care if you were black, white, purple, blue, or a monkey. All I wanted was a baby. I just wanted a baby. And that, like, now looking at that, it's like, you really didn't, to me, and I know she didn't mean this in the way that it's coming across. Yeah. She was just so desperate to be a mom again. Like, she couldn't have any children after she had my brothers. So I grew up in a family where my brothers were their biological children. I was the only one that was adopted. It was 11 years later that they adopted me, and I was the only girl. So I kind of grew up like an only child. Sure. And, she just really wanted to be a mom again. And so she'd tell me this story all the time. And I think in her mind, it was like, she told this story because she wanted me to feel like I was really wanted. But when I think about that story, it feels like, you didn't care if I was a monkey? Like, you didn't care if I was, you just wanted a baby. Like, it felt so impersonal. It wasn't that it felt like, oh, you didn't really want me. You just wanted, like any baby would have done, kind of.
Yeah. Oh, I understand. That would have felt
like,
I was always nervous that they're going to take me back to Canadian Tire. Return us.
Oh my!
I know.
Yeah. Did you really have that fear though?
Yeah, I did at times. Yeah. Well, just I think when me and my brother would get in trouble or we're fighting, I'm like, are they going to take us home or take us back to Canadian Tire and return us?
My goodness.
Even though I knew we weren't from there, it was like somewhere around that. It was close to West Edmonton Mall, I believe, or attached to West Edmonton Mall. So yeah, they're going to return us when we're misbehaved.
I don't know if I ever felt like they were going to return me. I always more or less felt like I was going to leave them and go find my own, my real family, like that fantasizing of who my real family was and, where they were and if my it really mostly I only thought about my birth mother. I'd never thought about my birth father ever at all.
Right.
And when I would think, I would always be thinking about my birth mother. Where was she? Was she thinking of me? I always pictured her with like long, dark, beautiful hair. And she was, you know, nothing beyond her looks. Like I never thought of, you know, what she did for a living or anything like that. But I thought of her all the time and longed for her. Like I really longed for her.
Yeah.
You know, did you do
yeah.
that whole fantasizing thing?
My biological mom was busy being a movie star.
That's what you thought?
I swore that and he was too. And in fact, I used to watch that sitcom that was so back in the day.
I think you told me this.
Facts
of
Life.
Yes.
My biological mom was Joe. So I would watch that intently, like in my mind. I'm like, Joe, that's why she's way too busy to come and take me home because she's too busy being a movie star. But yeah, the fantasy thing's a real thing. I never once had a negative feeling around them. They were still together. They were extremely wealthy. They were going to swoop in and somehow make it all make sense. And they were missing me. I truly thought that the entire time I was an adolescent, that they were just waiting for the right time to come back and find me.
Wow.
But then at the same time, I had horrible guilt for feeling that way because I loved my family that I was raised in. I mean, they are my parents and my brother. So it's a very conflicting feeling when you're longing for something that you miss, and you've put them on this pedestal.
Yeah.
And then feeling like you're betraying
your
adoptive family. So those are feelings that I never would have expressed at all. In fact, our adoptive family never really talked about adoption in terms of emotionally, how are my brother and I doing, or how can we make sense of this? I think it partly was, there was no information available back then. Generationally, we never talked about our feelings ever. And so we were just left to kind of figure it out.
Yeah. Adoption's all about loss for everybody, you know, and this loss that you've experienced by not, you know, by being separated from your biological family, and it has to leave an impact on you. It has to. But there's no space or conversation or acknowledgement of that loss and grief. In my story anyway, there wasn't.
Oh gosh, no.
And, you know, things are changing now. Like I have a lot of adoptive mothers that I know are asking, how do I support my adopted baby? This one mother, she said, I've got this little 3-year-old baby who's in my arms right now. And I'm looking at her thinking, she's got this primal wound. She's going to carry it for the rest of her life. What do I do about that? How do I make it okay for her? And so I responded, I said, the fact that you are just acknowledging that she has a primal wound, that she has this loss, that she's experienced this loss is most of the work. That's what, you know, I said, you're already healing her by just acknowledging that. And in turn, it kind of felt like it was healing me a little too, you know, because they don't acknowledge that. Even when we talk about adoption, you tell someone you're adopted. What's the first thing people say when you say, oh, I was actually adopted?
Oh, have you found your biological parents?
Yeah.
That's the first question. And because it's an interesting story.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Which, you know, to me, that just goes right back to that innate desire or need to know who you came from, where you came from. Yeah. I've had some weird ones. I've had people say, oh my gosh, you're so lucky. I wish I was adopted.
I've had some weird ones too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
I've had not my auntie, but a auntie say, oh my gosh, you're adopted. We would never adopt children. You in their mind, they risked bringing in evil into their home. So they saw it as a protective mechanism.
For like what? Like a bloodline?
A bloodline
like
of
generational curses down a bloodline?
Yes. And they didn't want it entering their... I remember staring at her as she's telling me this story and, are you kidding me? Yeah. But I understand there's just a fear there, I guess, if you're taking on someone else's child, that you're taking on all of that too into their home. And that was really hard for me to hear, because I was just like, I felt that wave of rejection come over me, because I'm like, but it's just me. I'm just such a loving person.
Yes.
So much to give. I'm good. But yet maybe it made me question, am I good? Or am I enough? Am I enough? Yeah.
Like you're poisoning their bloodline.
Yeah, exactly. That's
a little bit messed up. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like when I think about that, because, and it's interesting because from my perspective, I've done some deep healing work. And what I've come to realize is that when you're an adopted person, you carry 4 bloodlines. Because four sort of like generational stuff that gets passed down from your biological mother, biological father, adoptive mother, adoptive father. You can't tell me that if there's trauma or dysfunction within your adoptive family, that doesn't somehow, get passed down to us in some sort of way. So she's worried about you being contaminated, contaminating the family line. And I'm like, you guys have all contaminated me. Like I've had to take on all your dysfunction now too, and heal from it as well.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Speaking of the adoptive parent side, I know my mom worried. I was raised in an extremely, I would say poverty-stricken upbringing. We had my grandparents that really stepped in to support us. So my mother's deepest fear was that social service would come and do a welfare check and see and feel that they weren't wealthy enough to keep us. And so she also had this fear that me and my brother would be taken. That was probably one of her biggest fear. I asked her recently about that, and she's like, honestly, she just felt that she wasn't able to provide enough. So she worked 2 jobs to support our family. So she was home when we were little, but she always felt like she had to work, and she did. And she was gone a lot. So she always had this fear that we were going to be taken away.
My mom had that fear too, but it kind of was, I didn't grow up in poverty, but my mom had this really irrational fear that I was going to be abducted. And so I was always afraid of being abducted. Like even as a young adult, like thought that some stranger was going to come into the house and steal me. And it was really, and then consequently, I feel like I was really overprotective of my kids because I thought, I felt like this was a real thing to fear and be concerned about. And because I think when they got me, my biological mother had 6 months to decide whether she wanted to come back and get me.
Right.
And my mom said she had planned to run away with me to Mexico if it ever came down to that. But she was always, talking to me about, stranger danger. And we had like a secret password and like all of those good things that you do with your kids anyway. But I was sure I was going to be abducted at some point in my life, I don't know.
I find it interesting that she was nervous that the biological family was going to come back for you. I think I've read that that's a common fear for a lot of adoptive parents.
Yes. And can you imagine?
Oh, yeah, very tough.
Like you bond with this child and then.
Yeah. A ton of compassion for adoptive parents. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not easy.
No.
I think for a long time, I was really, I think I've gone through sort of stages of how I view adopted parents, biological parents, and even adoptees. You know, there was a time where when I first started to sort of get online and connect with other adoptees, I was like, holy cow, these adoptees are angry. Like they are so angry. There's such a spectrum of experiences in adoptees. And I'm not saying like I don't fault them for being angry. Like I have had some serious rage issues in my life, but like
me too.
Yeah.
Explosive rages.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
It's common though. Was it you who was telling me that it's very common for adoptees to
have rage? I don't know if I attached it to adoptees. I attached it to myself. Learning how to manage that kind of, quick to explode, but quick to come back to reality as well.
Do you remember being angry as a child?
No, not at all. I was the picture perfect heavenly child.
Well, that's not possible because my mom said that I was the picture perfect heavenly child.
I really was. That's funny because I think that's common. You can kind of go into a couple categories where I was so well behaved and so fearful of losing people in my life that I really did obey the laws to a T. Yeah. Not like, obviously when I was a teenager, I started going down the typical teenage path.
Yes.
But as a child, very well behaved and studious. My brother, on the other hand, was a little bit more expressive and all over the place. And
wow.
I'll tell you a story about a comparison because when I was a little girl, I don't remember talking. I knew I was adopted. I always knew I was.
Yeah.
But I never really talked to my mom about it as a little girl. I just kind of went through the motions. And my little brother, from the time he kind of connected the dots that he was adopted, every night at bed for a long time, like we're talking months and months and months. And he would have been between 2.5 to 3.5. He'd cry every night. And I remember hearing him cry and I'd see my adoptive mom cry. He'd be, I want my real mom. When she was trying to tuck him into bed, get away from me. You're not my real mom. And so devastating on both him and her.
Yeah.
Right? Because she was helpless. And this little boy was really experiencing some trauma around it.
Wow.
And I could remember him getting in a fight with my parents or my mom, and he'd get his little suitcase and he'd put all his He-Mans and Transformers in there. And he'd be out the door on the farm. Like, where was he going? We're not sure. But he would yell, I'm going to find my real family.
Oh my gosh. How old was he when he was adopted?
Like 10 days? I want to say 10 days. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Right away. Or 10 to 12 days, like little. But it was, he doesn't have very much memory of that.
Yes.
I can remember that. And obviously my parents can remember that. So some stuff was churning there from a little age, 2.5 to 3.5.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that is spectacular that he could make those connections and have those words. And he's probably better off that he was able to express that so
move
early
that anger
on. Yeah.
I would like to think that.
Yeah.
But we both struggled.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't share things from his perspective, but I know both of us really, really struggled as kids, just with a deep sense of it was just always there, this deep undercurrent of sadness and severe insecurity.
Did the two of you ever talk about being adopted with each other?
Never.
Have you since?
Very little.
Yeah.
Very little. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. We've talked a little bit about things and our experiences. I was on a quest to find answers.
Yeah.
It never really interested him.
Wow.
He found a half sibling, through some investigation, but more for health purposes, like, just hereditary issues that may come up for him, but very not seeking identity or belonging in that sense. But I know it affected him, and it definitely affected me growing up.
It's interesting when you talk about you're not my mom. I remember if my mom and I would get in a big fight, and we fought all the time. My mom and I, all the time. We had such a contentious relationship until, up until about the last 2 years of her life. But, or last year really of her life was when we had the most healing between the two of us. But yeah, like we would get in an argument and I would say, "You're not my real mom anyway." And
it's easy ammo.
Oh, I totally used it just to hurt her. I don't think I ever used it just for, because I actually
meant it.
No. I just wanted to hurt her because I was a little rager. Like I can remember being 7 years old and having this argument with her and going into my bedroom and ripping every item of clothing off of the hangers in my closet, every item in my closet, throwing it in the center of my room, ripping all of the clothes out of the drawers, everything, and just tossing everything into the center of the room because I was just so angry and I didn't know what to do with myself. And that kind of anger and rage like followed me for many, many years. It's probably been only the last 2 years that rage has really calmed down.
I've only experienced that rage with partners. When it seems to come out in me as intimate, deep partners.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Partners or my mom or my adopted mom. Yeah.
My adopted mom is she's happy all the time.
Really?
Yeah. I don't recall us ever battling. And that's because of her personality though. Because I have that feist and that fire. But I think the combination of her personality and mine, it just worked. It's not that we never fought, but we just had a very calm relationship.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what rage was until I fell in love.
It's like as deep as you can love, that's as deep as you can hate,
you're so vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's a place of vulnerability. And
I will have Stuart on the podcast, and he was sort of a key to me figuring out what the root of that rage was for me, and being able to really connect where the root of that was, and being able to, because I think once you discover where the root cause is, then it doesn't have that control and power over you anymore.
Exactly.
Quite so much.
That's right.
Yeah. I think there's such a big spectrum of adoptees, where some feel that they weren't impacted by their adoption at all, and all the way to some, feel like they were part of a whole human trafficking ring, buying babies. And some of them were. I personally know people who have been in that situation, and that's difficult to reconcile. But there is a big spectrum, I think, of where adoptees are at in their journey. And I think I've learned to have a little bit more grace for them. I think I said before, I was talking about, I got connected with all these adoptees online, and it's like, holy cow, these there's some real angry adoptees out here. And I felt in some of those circles, like if I wasn't hating my biological parents, or I wasn't hating my adoptive parents, then there was something wrong with me. Like I almost felt, like I felt like, I don't know. Have you heard of the term coming out of the fog?
In relation
to adoption?
No.
So some people don't like this term, but coming out of the fog is like when you first read those adoption books and your eyes were like opened to how your being adopted impacted you. At what point do you feel like you realized that adoption had an impact, being adopted had an impact, or being relinquished had an impact on you? And how did that sort of play out in your life?
Yeah. Okay. So getting back to the coming out of the fog, wouldn't have been till later adult life.
Yeah.
That I actually started making the connections. So with those connections made, I was able to reflect more at my childhood and how I behaved in my childhood, and even my young adult life, how I was behaving. So I would say when I was a child, I was extremely insecure. I think I mentioned that before, but to the point that it was holding me back. My thought processes were always around keeping myself little and quiet in order to making other people feel accepted and loved and seen ahead of myself. And that was just ultimate people-pleasing behavior. So I was so insecure in my friendships, what I was wearing, very body conscious. If my friends looked at me the wrong way, I would be in tears, hyper sensitive child. If I remember one memory of me handing in a library book late, and I was in tears because I thought the librarian was going to be disappointed in me.
Yeah.
My adoptive mom's like, what is the big deal here? But it would eat me alive if I did something wrong. And I remember one time I was in grade 6, and the group of girls said a comment about me wearing black shoes with navy blue socks, that they disapproved of it. Not a big deal, but I literally had to go to the infirmary that day, and I cried and cried and cried and cried because I thought they all hated me about my socks. Weird, like just very weird ways I would spin things in my mind because I just so deeply wanted acceptance.
Yes.
So deeply wanted acceptance.
Yeah. I relate to that deeply. Yeah. Like even I can remember being in class, and if I was chatting with my neighbor or something and the teacher would ask me to be quiet, it was like they had shot me in the heart. It was like, I thought, oh my gosh, they hate me. I'm the worst. All eyes were on me. I was so embarrassed. I was ashamed of myself. It was, I relate to that insecurity big time. And never feeling truly safe within relationships, and then sabotaging relationships so that I could hurt them before they could hurt me, or that I would leave them before they would leave me. And
as a young woman, I got married young. So I met my now ex-husband, but when I was a week after I turned 18, and I just fell into that young marriage because it offered me so much security. And I was just longing for that in my life, looking back at what was going on in the background at that point in time. And I think me latching to him as a partner would have been extremely tough for him. But I didn't know back then what I was doing, but I had really attached, I guess, my sense of identity to that marriage.
Yeah.
And him as a person. I mean, who can really fill those shoes? It's very hard.
Yes.
So I remember I had children young too. I had my first baby when I was 22, and just watching the clock, waiting for him to get home, phoning him like a crazy woman, like, when are you home? When are you home? When are you home? Can you get home? But you're going to be late. Don't be late. And just this intense anxiety.
Yeah.
I felt so overwhelmed all the time. Really, really needed that extra layer of assurance all the time. And I had it from my mom. She was always there helping me, or just always present. But I really needed it from my partner. It would have been very, very challenging to manage me at times, like looking back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I relate to that.
My deep need for security.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think I shared this with you before, but we lived in because I got married young too, had a baby young. And then I can remember we lived in this apartment, and I would pace around the apartment while my now ex-husband was out. And I'd walk to the door and I'd look through the people. No, he's still not there. And I'd pace around and walk to the door and look through the people. And it was just like that, do you think it has something to do with that hole, that void that we, walked around with and just so desperately needed somebody to anchor us in?
And even to try to fill that hole.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know my default was to look to others to fill that hole that was in my heart. Whether it was through my children, my friendships, my partner, my parents, just always kind of clinging and searching for external to fill that painful hole that was in my heart.
Yeah.
I know that now. I didn't know that then. And I think that's my deep work as I keep growing and changing and evolving is self-love.
Looking back on it as this young woman just running around, grasping at anything and everything just to feel okay and feel a sense of safety. What do you think for you the whole was?
Oh, back then, I wouldn't have known there was a hole. I had a deep level of sadness all the time. Not that I knew how to share that with people.
Yeah.
I really think it's like I had a low-grade fever. The fever being this layer of sadness just under the surface all the time. It was like a low-grade illness that never left me. And then I would feel guilty about feeling sad because I had a great life.
Yes.
And I couldn't really understand, but why do I feel empty and not whole? I thought I just needed go get on antidepressants, pull up my bootstraps and just keep on going, busy myself to death so I didn't have to sit and think.
Yeah.
So perpetuated habits that blocked me from actually feeling, working, chasing 3 little children all the time, supporting my then husband in his pursuits, but never really fostering my own dreams and desires and figuring out who I was as a woman because it was just too painful to go there. So I just avoided everything at all costs. So I think that was the hole. Yeah. That was the sadness and the hole that drove my life. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it at the time until later in life, faced with my divorce and the shattering of that family that I had poured my whole identity into, was really what perpetuated the journey to figure this out. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. When I was really, really faced with darkness, that was the journey to my little girl and to discover what was really going on under the surface. And it's been a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful experience.
Yeah.
But hard.
What was she telling you? What did she tell you? Like when you met with the little girl and you got in touch with yourself, what did she tell you?
Well, I think honestly, my first experience with that would have been me going home, metaphorically speaking, visualizing in my mind going to that farmhouse, walking down into the basement. I could see my bedroom, everything as it was. Like, these are memories that I hadn't visited in a long time. And I saw myself sitting on my bed, just sitting there. And I had my little like mullet haircut.
Because it was the 80s.
Yeah. And I remember going into that bedroom and just seeing her. And it was so emotional for me because I saw how lonely she was. And when we were able to embrace one another and I was able to bring her home with me, I think the journey back to myself was really going back in time and finding that little girl that I had left behind all those years ago and that I really had abandoned for everybody else. So reuniting with her and the journey back to home, and home meaning like my true essence as a woman who God made me to be, has been the work, but the most profound work of healing. I can't get this from external sources. I've tried.
Yeah. Yes.
Believe me, I've tried.
Yeah.
But to shake that insecurity has been, it helped me step into who I am without worrying about what other people think. And that just feels like freedom.
Oh my gosh.
Like freedom.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said a word that I connect with so deeply, which is loneliness.
Oh, loneliness.
And I think that for me was the sadness. I think that for me was the hole. I think I just felt so rejected everywhere I went, even though I wasn't. It was like I could have a whole room of people show up for me and tell me that they love me, and their actions show me that, you know, they want to be there for me.
Yeah.
But I could never believe it
I couldn't
for myself.
Believe it. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Loves me.
Yeah.
There was such a block for me.
I have death in my life growing up, and death, you know, I was always very impacted by death. Like whenever a cousin or a family member would pass away, it would like take me out for days. I could just being a little girl, I can remember just the sadness, the loss, the grief. And in 2020, my mother-in-law passed away. Stu's mom passed away suddenly in her sleep. And I don't know what about that death. And I think that it was that maybe I was more in touch or in tune with myself than I'd ever been before. But there was something about that death that triggered me to feel and experience all the grief that I'd ever experienced in my whole life.
Wow.
Like grief that I had sort of didn't know what to do with, didn't know how to process, including that grief and loss of family, biological family, identity, you know, all of those things. And someone said something during that loss to me. They said, you know, when somebody passes away, like you never get over it, right? Like you don't get over the death of somebody, but it's like losing a limb, and you learn how to function through the rest of your life without that limb, you know? And so I think a lot of, when I think about adoption now, or I think about relinquishment trauma, I think that it is definitely a loss. And it's not about getting over it. It's about accepting it and learning how to integrate that loss back, like that loss in your life, and how to operate with having experienced that loss and not let it take you over. Because I don't want to be stuck in that pain. Like I don't want to be stuck in that yuck, you know?
Right.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, you're making sense because I think until recent years, I was able to connect the dots that what we experienced as an infant was death. We lost our parents. I never really had thought about it like that. But how does a baby grieve?
Yeah.
It can't even process it. All of a sudden, it's just disconnected from its family. Whether you stayed one day or whether you stayed a few years, it's very hard for that child to even make sense of it. They go inwards. They think, what is wrong with me? And that's how I've lived my whole life, is what is wrong with me?
Yeah.
I didn't fit in anywhere. I felt like a black sheep my whole life. And I didn't have the support systems in place therapy-wise to help me make sense of that. So I was left to my own rumination, like trying to make sense of it.
Yeah.
But my brain couldn't. So I think with now the information that's available to families and children, so helpful. Because I know for myself, like going on this journey without the proper therapy systems in place, were very difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
So now there's so much information, even just awareness, like you were saying, is key, and compassion and grace. Everyone's story is different.
Yeah.
Everyone's dynamics will be different. Then you have the nature, our actual natural nature that comes out too. It's not just the nurture. So you've got so many things at play, but it is so nice to have different modalities in place now to help navigate that.
Yes.
But we didn't have that growing up.
No.
Or at least I didn't.
No.
Yeah.
I went to see a therapist when I was 21, and I got my dad to drive me. And he was like, "What are you going there for? They're just going to put crazy ideas in your head." Just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You know, and he was born in 1942 or something, 43, something like that. And it's like, of course, that generation,
Right.
you know, therapy wasn't something.
You don't even go to the doctor back then.
No. My dad was like old farm boy, right?
Yeah,
like grew up in Saskatchewan. Yeah. So
that reminds me. Well, back to the fantasization of our families. My adopted mom, Arlene, she knew that I was just thirsty to find answers. So when I was 17, I said, "Mom, as soon as I'm legal, I want to find them." In my mind, I was still thinking like she's still on the movie set somewhere. So my mom found this adoption center in Calgary that offered counseling services.
Wow.
I went to one session because I think probably that's all we could afford at the time. Or, I mean, that was a big drive back then for us. And so I thought, man, go talk to somebody about this. Okay. Yeah. So I went to therapy for the very first time. And, you know, bless her heart, like I was a deer in the headlights because that's when I discovered, like, wait a second, this could possibly not be a fairy tale ending. It wasn't even on my radar. But she brought up the point, like, well, what happens if you were a secret and no one knew about you? And I was like, pardon me? What happens if you were a child from, unfortunate circumstances that was completely hidden underground? What happens if you're still a secret? What happens if they don't want to see you? What happens if it's not the fairy tale ending? So just very, very in 1 hour session kind of blasted me with all of these questions and doubts in my mind that really shook me to the core because I never thought about the negative. I only thought about the positive. But I'm thankful that she prepared me because for what happened when I did go on my journey, it wasn't a fairy tale ending for me. And I don't think it is for a lot of people.
No.
But it was helpful to have my eyes open to all of the other, predictable outcomes that I was going to discover.
Yeah. So one thing that I've really noticed as I've gone on this, journey of connecting with other adoptees is that there's a real need for us to feel connected to one another and to, have these conversations, and not just between adoptees. But I think what happens when we do stuff like this is that it creates opportunity for conversations with other family members as well. So I think, doing something like this, like a podcast, and being able to talk about these things and be really open and vulnerable about our experience. And it's not just about adoption. Like, yes, it's called the Because She's Adopted podcast, but it's so much deeper than it goes so much deeper than that, I think. And so I really look forward as we do the next few episodes to further, get into branches of our lives and of our healing journey too with you.
We're using our adoption as a platform to inform the community. But I really think that when it comes to separation wounds, rejection wounds, it's a universal problem for a lot of people. So we're starting a communication around it.
Yeah.
And I agree, when we share our stories, we heal. I heal just from hearing your story. I heal from hearing everyone's story. When you're in a safe container where you can talk about things that have hurt you in your lifetime, that in itself is so much power. I can heal from others.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to share my journey with you in hopes that it can just inspire someone else to do the work that they need to do to gain freedom from their pain. It's possible.
It is. Well, this was a great episode. I think it was a great first episode. And it was so nice to get to know you a little bit more too. Like, we've known each other for so many years, but I don't know if we've really had that opportunity in that space to really get to know each other's journey. And we share many similarities. And I'm just looking forward to what's to come.
Me too. Yeah. Me too. It's great.
Okay. Thanks, Kristal.
Thanks, Kristal.
Thank you for joining us today on the Because She's Adopted podcast. Please like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Leave a rating, review wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time.